The SpaceX IPO jumped over 20% on the first day of trading, cementing Elon Musk as the world's first trillionaire. While he was already the richest person in the world with a huge gap between himself and number two, this new benchmark represents something unprecedented and, frankly, a bit terrifying. Let's start with what this actually means in proportional terms, because hearing someone is a trillionaire raises an eyebrow but lacks meaning without context. With a personal wealth of more than $1 trillion, that puts Musk ahead of the second wealthiest person, Larry Page, co-founder of Google, by almost 300%. If you're more of a visual thinker, consider this. If you laid $1 trillion end to end on the Earth's equator, it would circle the globe more than 380 times. If you stack them on top of each other, that stack would be 630 miles or more than 3 million feet tall. As 21 Savage put it, straight up stacks to the ceiling. And let's quickly dispatch the whole liquid versus paper argument. No, Musk does not have $1 trillion sitting in a vault somewhere. That number combines all cash or cash equivalents, stock ownership, investments, and other illiquid assets. Elon's personal wealth now represents more than 2.5% of the U.S. GDP, as much as John D. Rockefeller in his prime when Standard Oil controlled 90% of the U.S. oil market. But even adjusted for inflation, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Vanderbilt would have topped out around $300 to $400 billion each, roughly equivalent to Larry Page in today's dollars. The comparisons between Musk and the robber barons of the Gilded Age are remarkable for a number of reasons, but I'm most interested in the power and influence that kind of wealth creates. And we can look at those industrialists to see how extreme wealth has been leveraged to gain power and influence. You know, one of the best ways to support small YouTube channels like mine is to subscribe. If you like the content and you'd like to see more of it, consider subscribing. Back to the episode. For anyone who slept through history class in middle school, the robber barons were 19th century industrialists who amassed huge fortunes by building monopolies in key industries like railroads, oil, steel, and finance, often via unethical, exploitative, or at a minimum, law-bending practices. They rigged markets, created monopolies, abused labor, bribed politicians, used U.S. military to attack workers on strike, pumped millions of tons of pollutants into the air and land, and used their influence to win massive government contracts and secure billions in subsidies. Right now, some of you are saying yes, but that was a different time. Maybe. But let's look at Musk's existing record, a record he created before becoming 3 times wealthier and more powerful than Rockefeller and Carnegie. As the saying goes, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it often rhymes. We've already seen how Musk manipulated his SpaceX IPO by cajoling the Nasdaq into changing its rules, creating forced buying and artificial scarcity. By forcing SpaceX into the Nasdaq 100, it's estimated as much as $70 billion of SpaceX shares will be purchased by ETFs and index funds that will buy at any price as soon as the stock is included in the index. I just published an episode on these mechanics in case you want to dive deeper into how all that works. Commentators and space policy watchers openly describe Musk's growing dominance of launch and low-orbit internet connectivity as an alarming, quote, monopoly on space, warning that one private actor should not be allowed to control so much of the orbital and communications infrastructure. If he is even remotely successful launching data centers in space, that monopolistic position just grows exponentially. SpaceX has repeatedly gone to court to block the National Labor Relations Board from pursuing unfair labor practice cases, arguing that the NLRB's structure is unconstitutional. NLRB complaints have alleged that SpaceX required ex-employees to sign unlawful confidentiality agreements that limited their ability to discuss negative experiences, which undermines workers' rights to organize. Elon Musk critics argue that was his priority with Doge, defund regulators that had been hounding him for years. And then there was the nearly $290 million Musk donated to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. While Citizens United technically makes that legal, it's hard to argue that amount of political donations isn't bribery's kissing cousin. In 2024 and into 2025, Musk's America PAC ran lottery-style voter sweepstakes in swing states, offering $1 million per day to selected registered voters who signed a petition framed around supporting the Constitution. Entrants had to be registered voters in key battleground states and sign a petition. Winners got $1 million checks, and some were then featured as spokespeople or appeared in pro-Trump and conservative political messages. xAI installed and operated dozens of methane gas turbines at its data center without required air permits to feed the energy demands of its compute requirements. These turbines emit smog-forming pollutants and hazardous chemicals like formaldehyde, which are linked to asthma, respiratory disease, heart problems, and certain cancers. And now the surrounding neighborhood has a cancer risk estimated at 4 times the national average. Tesla's Fremont, California plant has been cited for over 180 air quality violations since 2019, including at least 75 in a single year. At Tesla's Austin Gigafactory, regulators and former employees allege the company has discharged hazardous wastewater into city sewers, emitted pollutants due to a faulty furnace, used a chemical waste pond where dead wildlife have been found, and one attempt to fix water pollution reportedly left nearly a mile of the Colorado River coated in a slick brown substance. But wait, there's more. SpaceX received more than $500 million in early grants from NASA and other federal programs, roughly half the capital it had raised by that point. A pivotal $1.6 billion NASA contract in 2008 effectively saved SpaceX from bankruptcy, which Musk himself has acknowledged. Tesla got a $465 million low-interest loan from the Department of Energy in 2010, benefited from around $3.4 billion in EV tax credits to buyers, and more than $14 billion in emissions credit revenues enabled by regulation. That's $17.4 billion in government loans, contracts, credits, and subsidies. So is Elon Musk the country's newest robber baron? Let's take a quick look at the comparison. Has he been responsible for rigging markets? Check. Creating monopolies? Critics would say so. Abused labor? NLRB alleges he did. Bribe politicians? Technically, no. Practically? Definitely. Polluted? Many times. Used influence to win government contracts and subsidies? 17.4 billion yeses. Just like Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, and Carnegie, Elon's wealth provides him with unprecedented influence over markets, politics, and the economy itself. But there's a couple key differences between Musk and those Gilded Age industrialists. Musk may now be worth more than all 3 of those robber barons combined, even when adjusted for inflation, at the absolute peak of their wealth. And unlike those barons, Elon is operating on a global scale and controls access to everything from space to the internet. It's not hard, based on his track record, to see how he could wield that power. Elon decides he doesn't like the geopolitics of a certain region, or decides to take sides in an international conflict, or thinks his government contracts aren't hefty enough. Oops, Starlink just stops working in those regions all of a sudden. The rumors turn out to be true, and Elon wants to merge Tesla with SpaceX, but all those pesky SEC regulations, investor rights, and market rules are totally harshing his mellow. Nothing a phone call to a White House already shown to be for sale, promising billions in campaign contributions in exchange for more favorable treatment from regulators, can't fix. Want to launch a competitor to Starlink's low-orbit satellite internet fleet? Better hope Blue Origin has some capacity for sale, or that Virgin Galactic transitions from being mostly Sir Richard's fever dream into a functioning launch operation. Maybe Tesla has a few million pounds of industrial waste that would be more conveniently dropped into the water supply of tens of millions of people in the southwest United States, instead of being disposed of properly. Hordes of white shoe lawyers retained by Musk or one of Musk's companies file enough paperwork with district courts to suspend any meaningful resolution for 100 years. And it's not just me making this comparison of Musk to a robber baron. Bloomberg commentators have said that Musk's trillionaire status gives him resources approaching those of many nation states, echoing Rockefeller's share of the economy, and warn that wealth on this scale can buy, quote, absolute power in a republic. Analysts explicitly describe Musk as emblematic of a new generation of robber barons, accumulating unprecedented money and power in ways that threaten democratic checks and balances. Dame Magazine wrote, quote, "This isn't the first time in U.S. history that the oligarchs wielded tremendous influence over the government. But now, with far more money and control over our information, they're poised to seize power," end quote. I've seen the online Musk protectionists attempting to shame people for saying they don't think we should have trillionaires, that their concerns are an anathema to free market capitalism, and go so far as to say that anyone showing any concern for this concentration of wealth and power is a socialist, hates money, or is jealous of Musk's wealth and success. Historically speaking, individuals with this much wealth also have overweighted influence and power. Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Vanderbilt had only a fraction of Elon's wealth, even in today's money, and they rigged markets, abused labor, bribed politicians, and built unchecked monopolies. And we've seen what Elon did with his influence over the last few years before nearly doubling his net worth over the last 12 months. I think it's reasonable to be wary of that kind of wealth and power. I'd say it's smart to question and even hold a reasonable level of fear about the power and control this unprecedented amount of wealth creates. There's no denying that in America, power and influence increases with wealth. And now one human being has more wealth and by extension more power than the next 4 richest people on earth combined. And that should, at a minimum, send a shiver down your spine. That's it for this episode. As always, like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.